Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining our Rally for Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids, a part of our campaign's State Budget Advocacy Week. Our rally is a part of this week of action where we're mobilizing advocates and champions like yourselves to be a part of our movement and New York's mental and behavioral health crisis. The Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids campaign is a coalition of behavioral health which includes mental health and substance use providers, advocates, youth, parents, caregivers, and families that seek to create the public and the political will needed to ensure that all children and youth in New York State receive high quality behavioral health services they need. We're here today because it's important that we mobilize you and many other people across our state to ensure our state budget has the support and resources needed to help children, youth, and families thrive. In a moment, you're going to be hearing from a number of speakers about what is at stake this year as we advocate for mental and behavioral health supports. You'll hear from service providers, you'll hear from advocates, you'll hear from youth and parents and caregivers who are part of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Community Leadership Council, and about their experiences with their families. You'll hear about what we are doing to mobilize youth, parents, and caregivers, and you'll learn about how you can take action to support children, youth, and families in New York. To learn more, we're putting in the chat a link where you can stay connected with our campaign and learn about the issues, the priorities, and how to stay in touch with us. I also encourage you to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HMHK Campaign. So today, I'm really excited to introduce a great many speakers who are here advocating on behalf of themselves, their families, and their communities. Included in our speakers for today is Alice Bufkin, who is the Associate Executive Director for Policy and Advocacy at Citizens Committee for Children of New York. Brad Hanson, Public Policy Director at Families Together in New York State. Shoshana Hershkowitz, who is the statewide organizer at Citizen Action of New York. Shannon Zelensky, who's the care coordinator at Villa of Hope, as well as the board member at the New York State Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health. Tiara Springer Love, who is the director of Youth Power at Families Together in New York State. And of course, our youth, parent, and caregiver advocates that are part of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Community Leadership Council, which includes Preem Kabi, Nura Anwar, Mashrafi Anwar, Diane Tanner, Tamara Beagle, Kathy Salazar, Carol Murdy, and Cody Hauptman, and Christina Hauptman. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and pass the mic to Alice Bufkin, who's going to start us off talking a little bit about what is at stake and what we can do to support mental and behavioral health for children, families, and communities. Alice, I'll pass it on to you.
Thanks so much, Carlos. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Carlos said, my name is Alice Bufkin. I'm the Associate Executive Director of Policy and Advocacy at Citizens Committee for Children. CCC is a multi-issue children's advocacy organization, and we have a mission of ensuring every New York child is healthy, housed, educated, and safe. And we also help coordinate and support the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids campaign in the council. I'm so proud to be here with so many members of our HMHK Youth Caregiver Council. And I don't want to spend long speaking because we have so many incredible members of our campaign who will be sharing their stories and talking about the steps that we think that the state leaders need to take to make sure that every New York child can access the behavioral health services they need. What I will say is that our state has to do more. For decades, we have starved the children's behavioral health system. Our state has failed to invest in behavioral health, and especially behavioral health for children and families. And as a result, we have children on wait lists for months. We have young people cycling in and out of ERs and hospitals. We have families who are increasingly desperate to find supports that their children urgently need. Death by suicide is the second leading cause of death for children aged 15 to 19 in our state. And only about half of children with behavioral health challenges receive the services they need. We have to do better. Our state is starting to move in the right direction. Mental health is being prioritized by state leaders in a way it hasn't in a long time, and we're glad to see that. But as you'll hear today from so many members of the council, we have a long way to go before we're making sure our young people are safe, healthy, and thriving. We hope you'll join us in urging state leaders to invest in children and families and to make sure every child and adolescent has the behavioral health supports they need and they deserve. With that, I'll turn it back to Carlos so we can start hearing from some of our amazing partners in the state.
Thank you, Alice. Next, I'd like to introduce Brad Hansen, who is with Families Together in New York State, to speak a little bit about his organization as well as the partnership we have in doing this work. So Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Carlos. Excellent remarks, Alice. I'm Brad Hansen, the policy director at Families Together in New York State. We're a statewide family-run organization that represents families and young people with lived experience navigating systems like the mental health system and many others, including education and foster care, addiction, developmental disabilities, and of course, education. It's very tempting to be happy looking at this budget that that Governor Hochul has put out. It's, having done this work for 10 years and the organization have been around for 20, it's incredible to see a governor focusing on children, talking about families and their needs, and saying explicitly that they want to fix the mental health continuum. But there is no continuum without a workforce, without people serving the families. And that's what's missing in this budget. And despite all the wonderful things we're seeing, capital, money for buildings is not the same as what we need, which is people. And that's what this system is built on and what is struggling right now. We have a crisis. There's more demand for youth behavioral health than ever before. And at the same time, there's a demoralized workforce that is leaving the field in favor of other jobs that call for less emotional distress on a daily basis. So if we actually want to solve the crisis and help young people, give them the tools they need to thrive, we're going to have to invest in the people who help build them up. And that's what we're calling for this year. So we're very excited to be here. The Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Caregiver and Youth Council is an incredible endeavor to bring parents and young people and help them organize and lead a campaign that will impact their lives and the thousands of families and young people across the state. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to hear from everybody.
Great. Thank you, Alice and Brad, for sharing those initial remarks with everyone. I just want to give a shout out to both Alice and Brad, as well as Zach, and then Shannon, who you'll hear in a moment, as the key organizing partners and staff that has been supporting the work and development of our youth parent and caregiver councils. So excited to be working with them and having them here to set the stage for what you'll be hearing from our various speakers today. Now, I'd like to transition to have a few of our speakers working in different child serving organizations as service providers and advocates to speak a little bit about why we are here, why this is a critical moment this budget advocacy season, and what is at stake for youth and families in this upcoming budget. So next, I'll pass it off to Shoshana Hershkowitz to speak a little bit about her perspective with this work that we're doing here in this campaign. So Shoshana, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Shoshana Hershkowitz. I'm the statewide organizer for education and childcare at Citizen Action of New York. And we are working on issues of universal childcare. We're looking at equitable funding in public schools. And we're also working on school climate in the form of the Solutions Not Suspensions Act, because we know that young children with disabilities, as well as students of color and LGBTQ students, are disproportionately suspended from school. So these are the bills that we are working on, and we're proud to be in partnership and coalition with Families Together New York State and Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids campaign. Aside from the work I do at Citizen Action, I am an educator with over 2 decades of experience in both public K-12 and public higher education. And I'm a mom of 2 school-age children, one of whom is we are using the resources of the school mental health system. So because of the many ways that I interact with the systems, I'm here to share my thoughts about what's at stake and talk about why these budget asks are so crucial. And, I think that a budget is a moral document that points to our priorities as a society. And, as Brad said, there are certainly some good things to celebrate in this budget, but if we are not funding the people who are providing those services, then we will be left wanting. And that means our kids will be left in need. And we need to be investing in our kids and our families in aspects of state funding. It's more urgent than ever that we prioritize the mental health of young people. There is a really well-documented youth mental health crisis right now, and it is even more prominent in the aftermath of COVID. And the pandemic, I feel it really laid bears the inequities and the barriers that too many New Yorkers experience on a daily basis, including mental health treatment. And I can speak to this. My children were home on remote learning, and I watched with my younger child some real mental health issues arise. And I was fortunate enough to live in an area where we have a lot of access. There's a lot of resources, and I was willing to do some paying out of pocket. But not everyone's in that position. Not everyone has the privilege of resources and the privilege of disposable income. So we need to make sure that no matter your zip code, no matter your resources, every child has that kind of access. They can get the services they need and deserve, both out of school and within the school system. Our children are struggling. And I have seen this as an educator. I've seen it with the students I teach. I've seen it as an organizer. I've seen it as a parent in my own household. And our children need comprehensive, accessible, affordable, and equitable mental health care. And it can no longer be dependent on the privileges of financial means or health care coverage or insurance. Every child deserves this access. Every parent deserves to be able to provide what their children need. And every school deserves the resources and ability to provide for their students. That should not be dependent on your zip code. So this is what's at stake in our budget fight. And the truth is, it is more than just dollars and cents and data. It is the well-being of our kids. And if we are a truly just society, or if we're trying to be one or aiming to be one, we have to prioritize caring for our kids, no matter their zip code, no matter their skin color. Every child deserves their mental health and their overall well-being to be prioritized. And that's what's at stake today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Shoshana. And I'm glad you mentioned LGBTQ youth as well. We've been hearing, being a part of that community, I've been hearing about just the risk for depression, anxiety, and suicide within my own community. And the fact is that when there is adequate care and support, there's hope to change things around. I'm thinking of this 2019 survey from the Trevitt Project that found that if a youth had one affirming adult in their life, a child who identifies as within the LGBTQ community can reduce the risk of suicide by 40%. And so it's clear, I think, from what you're sharing, that it is important to create not only welcoming and safe environments, but also making sure that the resources, the services are going to the youth and children that essentially need it. So thank you for sharing that. Next, I'd like to pass the mic over to Shannon, who is a board member of the New York State Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health and our third partner in the work that we're doing with our youth, parent, and caregiver councils. So Shannon, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Again, my name is Shannon Zielinski. I am a board member of the New York State Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health. I am also a children's case management care coordinator at the Villa of Hope in Monroe County, Rochester, New York. And I'm also a family peer advocate. I have the privilege to be representing the New York State Coalition for Children's Behavioral Health in partnership with the Citizens Children's Committee and Families Together in New York State. We've been working together to support the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Community Leadership Council to advocate for the priorities to improve New York State's children's behavioral health. Today, you will hear from council members about the challenges children and families are facing due to services not being available, causing additional trauma that is preventable. Providers are challenged with workforce shortages, delayed reimbursements, lack of appropriate funding, and a demoralized, overworked workforce, doing all they can to cover their positions as well as vacant positions to provide children and families services. In many cases, this is not even possible, and wait lists continue to grow. Providers are committed to seek improvement for staff and the children and families being served. Increased funding is necessary to fund services and pay staff livable wages. Mental health employees should not need to work multiple jobs to survive. Mental health staff continue to leave the workforce for higher paying jobs or for equivalent pay, but less stressful employment. We should not be supporting children and families to be patient, waiting for weeks or months for a service provider to begin their services. This often leads to a higher level of need. Families deserve better and staff deserve better. It is also challenging for provider agencies to hire needed staff to fill so many vacant positions. Many employees have moved on, leaving others to do more with less support. Provider agencies need appropriate funding to retain, recruit, and support staff in order to provide children and families the mental health services today, not in weeks or months. Providers cannot support the increased need for services and are always trying to keep up, doing the best they can. We are here today to rally with children and families to increase funding so providers can retain the workforce they have and recruit staff for a sustainable workforce to support our children and families. Too many mental health workers are leaving this field due to burnout, higher paying jobs, risks, and hopelessness because of repetitive years where so little of the New York State executive budget goes to children's mental health. There is some hope with the $1 billion commitment to mental health services in the executive budget. We now need to see investments in services for children and families in the workforce that we need to support them. Thank you, Carlos.
Great, thank you, Shannon. And now, I'm excited to pass on the mic to the next few speakers because these speakers have joined us to be a part of this, our Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Council, and have been phenomenal so far in advocating for themselves, their communities, and children and youth across the state. So with no further ado, I want to pass it off to our first council member, Preem Kabi, to talk about what's at stake from their perspective. Preem, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Aprecia Preem Kabe. I'm a member of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Leadership Council. I am also an advocate for children and a resident of the city of Albany. Children are faced with behavioral health issues daily in schools, community, and at home. Our future is at stake. Our children's lives and well-being are at stake. Parents and families deserve dignity and programming options that relate and address safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment and choice, cultural, historical, and gender issues, and programs that encourage positive behavioral health for youth. Mental health issues for children are a priority. Services that practice these principles need and deserve adequate funding to sustain and empower healthy lifestyles for children in our great state of New York. Healthy Minds promote healthy kids, and I'll say that again, Healthy Minds promote healthy kids. And New York State, please recognize the urgency as we work together to bridge these gaps. As an advocate in the city of Albany, I created an art class that's trauma-informed care for children in our capital region. And mental health professionals definitely deserve to be paid an adequate wage so that they don't have to have 3 jobs and they're not burnt out and demoralized, and they can come to these spaces as their best self. And as they're coming to these spaces as their best self, they are affirming they are affirming to youth who they're in touch with. So as they are affirming these youth just their existency, it helps the youth to know that they are seen, they are heard, and they are respected. And I really hope that we can work together with New York State to bridge these gaps, because I'll say it once again, healthy minds promote healthy kids. And that's going to be promoting a better opportunity for all of our futures to be comprehensively working together and going in the right direction. Thank you so much for letting me speak today. And healthy minds to promote healthy kids.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Preem. Next, our next council member is Nura Anwar.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nura Anwar. I am a resident of New York City, a public health professional working in pediatrics, a former peer health exchange educator, and a mental health advocate. Throughout my professional and academic journeys, I have consistently encountered two recurring themes. Our children are the future, and there is no health without mental health. Last year, I had the privilege of presenting at several national pediatric health conferences. Although each conference represented a different aspect of pediatric health, not a single conference failed to highlight the growing concerns about our youth's mental health crisis. In the past year, 16% of youth had at least one major depressive episode. That translates to more than 7.7 million youth. More than half of the youth with major depressive episodes in the past year did not receive treatment. Nationally, we have only 10,500 child and adolescent psychiatrists. In New York, there are only 28 child psychiatrists per 100,000 children. And depending on which county you are from, there may be no child psychiatrists at all. Clearly, these provider-to-patient ratios are ineffective and failing our youth. According to experts, this unmet gap between the need for mental health services and the number of providers is estimated to only worsen if immediate action is not taken. In public health, we continue to stress the importance of engaging in preventive measures and how cost-effective and life-saving it is for patients in the long run in comparison to engaging in treatment measures. We should not be waiting for the next major depressive episode outbreak to take care of our children. We need to build capacity in areas where our children spend most of their time, such as in schools and community-based organizations, equipping teachers with mental health first aid training, creating staffing opportunities for peer support will enable our children to access multiple resources as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the ugly truth about the unpredictable nature of mental health issues and how it escalates is that sometimes it's too late to intervene. Our children cannot be waiting for months on wait lists. Therefore, I ask you all to please consider strengthening and building capacity in the mental health workforce so that we can stay true to protecting our children who are the future without compromising their health, which is nothing without mental health. Thank you for your attention, support, and ongoing efforts.
Thank you, Nura. And now we're shifting our speakers now to focus on also parent and caregiver perspective. Our next council member, Christina, will bring that perspective, talking about why she is here and this perspective on what is at stake for children and youth this coming budget season. So Christina, I'll pass it off to you.
Hi, my name is Christina Hauptman. I am a parent of a 15-year-old son named Cody. Not only am I a parent, I'm also a family peer advocate and a member of the Healthy Mind, Healthy Kids Council. However, this morning I am speaking to you from the parent perspective. Cody will be sharing his story in a little while and how he's been a victim of New York State's children's mental health system and the amount of unexcused and unnecessary trauma he has faced directly as a result. I, however, will fast forward through his childhood to 2019 when my 12-year-old son was released from residential treatment center to come home to his home and community-based services. I was so proud. I was proud of all he accomplished while he was in residential. He became social, he was outgoing, he participated in a talent show, and he even made it to the finals in the county 4-H program, where he did a presentation on the great white shark. For those that know Cody, Cody had a little bit of an obsession with the great white shark. I was very proud of him at that time and proud for him to be able to be discharged home. Cody was discharged and he was supposed to receive his in-home and community supports upon discharge. They were to help him grow mentally, socially, develop coping skills and techniques that he could utilize when his triggers would arise. Instead, I watched him come home. I watched him isolate. I watched my son's depression and anxiety grow worse each day that he was home. Each day that I watched the progress that he made diminish was another day that he was waiting for services. These services were on Cody's discharge plan and were medically necessary. In December of 2019, our story was first featured in an article, and it was called "Even as Youth Suicide Rises, New York State Continues to Cut Funds for Kids' Mental Health." This was pre-COVID and was written while Cody was on wait list after his release from that residential treatment center. In that article, I had made a statement that I feared that Cody would wind up back in the hospital or maybe worse while he was waiting for his services. He was deemed a high-risk child, and yet he sat on wait list after wait list. Well, my biggest fear had come true. 1 year after him being home from residential program, while still waiting on wait list, Cody had his first suicide attempt. The trauma we both endured that day will resonate with me forever. Reading his suicide note that he left behind is something that no parent should ever have gone through. Since that day, I check on Cody every night when he's asleep, just to make sure that he's still breathing. When my son was finally assigned workers, they didn't stay. And he's still yet to receive his full array of services 3.5 years later. The turnover and the numbers are a direct result of reimbursement rates. Agencies can't keep staff if they can't pay them, but how can they pay them if they aren't being reimbursed fairly? This is inexcusable, and shame on New York State for failing our children. Children need to be directly included in the governor's budget, or they'll continue to suffer unnecessary trauma while not having access to proper care they need and deserve. New York State's children's mental health system is broken, and it has been for way too long. We need everyone here today to take action so that we could finally see changes that are necessary and needed for our children before it's too late for our children to even see such changes take place. Thank you.
Thank you for Christina, for both you and Cody being here and sharing your stories and the vulnerability that comes with that. I think it's important to have council members like yourself who are clearly still grappling with these issues, but at the same time thinking about how coming from a place of strength with dealing with the crises that you've experienced, and thinking about the ways in which you can support not only yourselves, but other parents and young people experiencing similar situations. So I appreciate you sharing your stories. Lastly, our last two speakers for this section are gonna shift the focus a little bit to bring a bit of our youth perspective when it comes to mental and behavioral health supports, and set the stage up for what we'll be sharing in the second half of our rally here today. So first, I'll pass it off to Tiara Springer Love, who is with Families Together in New York State, to talk a little bit about the critical needs for youth mental and behavioral health supports and programming. Tiara, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm just going to share a little bit about my experience being a young adult and navigating systems, and echo some of the wonderful things that my colleagues have spoken about. So when I was 14 years old, I had my first mental health breakdown, and I was mandated to treatment. At that time, the experience was a smooth transition from the hospital to a community provider. Fast forward to me at 18, I was at yet another breaking point in my mental wellness journey, and the goal was only to survive. Although it was a challenge finding a provider who actually took my health insurance this go around, I did not give up, because one thing I wanted to do was live. By age 23, I found myself yet again needing clinical supports, only to be told I would have to be placed on a 2 to 4 month wait list no medications, and just a hotline to talk to someone. That waiting period was one of the most challenging times of my life. No one should have to wait to get the help they desperately want, the help they desperately need, and the help that they desperately deserve. During these times, that's when I got into several programs because providers were not showing up for me in the way that I needed support in. My mom put me in this Girls' Rites of Passage program. I was in the community tennis program at Roy Wilkins Park. I was also a part of a dance program over at this program called Intervisions. And my mother just threw supports at me, right? Like she just did not want me to have any idle time. And these are the programs that pretty much stepped in when clinical support and clinical treatment was not available to me. So without these programs, I could honestly say I wouldn't be here today, especially as Alice spoke earlier, with suicide being the third leading cause of death for young people ages 5 to 14, and it being the second leading cause of death for young people ages 15 to 19. And this is what happens, right? Like families and communities suffer when issues don't get addressed during the adolescent years. And we turn into adults. And I can say, like, I've seen my peers who have gone through similar struggles as mine, and they didn't have parents that could show up for them the way my mom showed up for me, right? Like being a young person who's navigated foster care, I am an adoptee. And then on top of that, being a young person who was diagnosed with mental illness and not getting supports, it was hard, you know? And these are just a couple of experiences that have driven me to become both a youth peer advocate and a social worker in the mental health field. And I have a growing desire to maintain employment in this field. However, how can I do that when access is declining and also the cost of living is increasing? There's an African proverb, and you all might know it, and it's it takes a village to raise a child. And it conveys the message that it takes many people making up this village to provide a safe, healthy environment for children, where children are given the security they need to develop and flourish, and to be able to realize their hopes and dreams. This requires an environment where children's voices are taken seriously, right? Where children can hold adults and elected officials accountable for the things that they promise. And where multiple people, such as the villagers, including parents, siblings, extended family, neighbors, teachers, professionals, community members, policymakers, et cetera, care for children. And that's what we're here rallying for today. And as a community, I want us to be able to take action and ensure that the proper investments are going into children's mental health. So thank you for allowing me to speak. Youth voices matter, and we can't have anything about young people without having young people at the table. So thank you.
Thank you, Tiara. And to close out this section, we have Mashrafi Anwar, who will bring youth perspective to this work and what's at stake this budget cycle. So take it away.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming today. My name is Mashrafi Anwar. I'm a Bengali American Muslim, and my dream is to become the first South Asian combo of professional basketball player and social worker, in hopes of using my platforms to touch the hearts of many. I want to pass on the knowledge I have to help people meet their most unmet needs and heal in ways that they never knew possible to make their days a little lighter. A lot of you may be wondering, what do his personal aspirations have anything to do with the mental health advocacy of children and families? And to that, I answer everything. The journey in which these dreams have put me on have given me the utmost privilege of meeting hundreds, maybe even thousands of the most kind, caring, and complicated souls who all have stories to tell. As a basketball player, I have met athletes who work hard every day to make something out of nothing as they fight out of the grave systemic issues had dug for them. As a camp teacher and counselor, I have met children with the brightest of eyes filled with imaginations and dreams, unable to process the everyday household trauma they normalize due to the lack of healthy examples. As a social work major, I have met classmates who feel the same drive to change the world and know how to help others, yet find it extremely difficult to help themselves. And ultimately, as a friend, I have found so many people who want to do this, who want to be the same for me, extending their empathy, love, and care for me while taking on the complicated life stories of their own. I will be very honest, I'm scared. Not scared of speaking in front of you all, not scared if I will stumble over my words, but scared to see the weight of the beauty get lighter as the mass of the ugly gets heavier for the beautiful souls that have the honor of getting to know. We, the youth, feel so extremely out of touch. From all the lived experience I have had the pleasures of hearing, something I have always seen is how they are all turned down for help by the older generations. This generation is too sensitive. The children are obsessed and glued to their phones for zero reason. They take too many things personally. They are so beyond fragile. Back in my days, I would have just sucked it up and dealt with it. And when the souls I have met are gone, how will the older generation console me? Will they tell me not to cry because I'm being sensitive, or to just move on because bad things happen to everybody? The reason many of us are sensitive and process our emotions is because the past generation did not get a chance to do so or did not want to. Sensitivity is strength. To all of the adults here, instead of fighting back against us, please take my words as an opportunity to turn a new leaf. A new leaf considering how you all can understand before assuming. Put your pride aside and find ways to break the cycle and provide us with the resources we truly and deeply need. When you all go back home, please ask the child or children in your life how they are doing and if there is any way you can be there for them in the way they need it. Please help provide the tools for us to be sensitive. Allow us to hone our strength and sensitivity. Thank you so very much, everybody.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all the incredible speakers who really set the tone for this part of our rally, talking about what's at stake and why these issues matter for youth, children, and families across New York. Now we're gonna shift our conversation a little bit and hear from council members about what we need our state leaders to do to address the children's behavioral health crisis. First, we're going to hear from Tamara, who is going to talk about our first priority, which is to commit at least half of the $1 billion for mental health in the governor's budget to services for children and families. In the chat, we're going to be placing links to our budget priorities as well as our take actions, so that way you can follow along our priorities as we share them and write to your state leaders about the importance of these recommendations making it in our current fiscal year budget. So Tamara, I'll leave you to go ahead with our budget recommendations number 1.
Good morning. My name is Tamara Bigel. I am a Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Council member who receives mental health care services, volunteers as an advocate, and am raising my children who receive services on Long Island. We appreciate Governor Hochul dedicating $1 billion towards mental health care in New York State, but we urge you to compel our governor and legislators to go further. Insist that half of that $1 billion, $500 million of that $1 billion, be earmarked directly in the budget towards the treatment of children and teens' mental and behavioral health care. The children are our future, and New York has failed our children for far too long. Children who attempt suicide should not be turned away from hospitals and sent to providers with 6 months to a year or more long waiting lists for life-saving treatment that is urgently needed. Children should not be put on endless waiting lists, only to be given overloaded case managers with unmanageable caseloads, because they are the last working member in their agency. Every child who needs wraparound services, peer support, family peer support, skill builders, family counseling, trauma-informed counseling, DBT should receive these supports. However, our children are not receiving the services that they need. This breakdown is not happening in 1 or 2 hospitals, 1 or 2 regions, 1 or 2 agencies, only in cities or only in rural areas. This is happening everywhere in every region in the entire state. For that reason, we insist that the governor and legislators ensure in the wording of the budget that the money is distributed equitably across geographies and areas with the greatest need. Mental health care is simply health care. It should be available, treated, and reimbursed with parity to general health care. Let's go back to what's at stake. Over 1 in 5 teens seriously contemplate suicide. This is not a family problem. This is a society problem. Those numbers increase drastically in children who have faced discrimination and marginalization. We must help all children in our communities. Black, Asian, Latinx, Middle Eastern, Indigenous peoples of color who face trauma. We must help our lesbian, bi, gay, trans questioning children and help their parents to overcome their preconceived notions. All our children deserve to have role models that reflect themselves and diversity in their treatment teams. As many of you have heard through the media and seen with your own eyes, we must restore the beds lost in stabilization hospitals, extended stay hospitals, residential treatment centers, and residential treatment facilities that are facilities that were lost starting in 2013 to present. In 2013, 24 mental health hospitals and facilities were closed throughout New York State. Starting in 2014, there were over 1,200 bed closures. There isn't even a count of the number of beds and units not being used because there just isn't the staff to keep those beds open. Our children remain on waiting lists, spending days on emergency psychiatric wards, waiting for beds in stabilization hospitals. They are waiting months in stabilization hospitals for beds in higher level of care hospitals, residential treatment centers, and residential treatment facilities. In both public and private hospitals, the facility and staff bed closures continued throughout the pandemic. However, New York's children, the ones who needed those beds, were repeatedly sent home from hospitals untreated to traumatized families. Each one of us here today has had an experience that inspired us to act. For me, the last straw was my son's stay in South Oaks Hospital. He was warehoused there for 2 months, waiting for a bed in a higher level of care facility. He was repeatedly attacked by other kids, and staff did not file the appropriate Justice Center reports. He was chemically, physically, and manually restrained in violation of current state and federal policy and laws. My son and other kids were unsafe in that hospital. Healthcare, including quality mental health care for all, is a human right and an achievable goal. It should be available, treated, and reimbursed with parity to general health care. Children are our future. If we provide the needed supports, treatments, therapies, and healthcare early when they first appear and train and treat the whole family, there are better outcomes for those same children as they grow and develop. They learn coping mechanisms, find treatments that work, and become active participants in their treatment teams. Self-medication and drug and alcohol use goes down. This leads to healthier adults and citizens who will give back to society and not require as extensive supports as adults. Let's invest in our future rather than criminalizing homelessness and hiding away adults with mental illness. If we only win one of our asks today, let $500 million of that $1 billion be directly written into the budget to support and save our children by investing in children's mental and behavioral health care and ensuring that it is distributed equitably across geographical and areas with the greatest need. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tamara. Just a reminder for everyone who would like to take action and haven't already, in the chat, we provided a link where you could see this and all our other priorities listed, as well as a take action where you can write to state leaders based on your address and where you live. So now we're going to hear from our second council speaker, Kathy, who's going to talk about the importance of our second priority, which is to increase the network of behavioral health providers in our state, including by supporting the workforce. Kathy, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Carlos. Hi, my name is Kathy Salazar. I live in Endicott, New York, and I'm a Marine Corps veteran and retired employee of the federal government with over 35 years of service. I'm looking at my video here. I might have to stop it, but I'll still be talking. After I retired in 2018, I became a foster parent, working directly towards reuniting parents with their children as the ultimate goal. If the kids couldn't be reunited, I actually adopted them. So now I have a 12-year-old son and I'm the legal guardian of his 15-year-old brother. In addition, I have grown children. I'm a grandmother and a great-grandmother. I'm also a member of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Leadership Council, representing my area in the southern tier of New York. So far, I've not actually gotten to retire. Both of my adopted boys are special needs children. They both have developmental issues due to toxicity in the womb. They have trauma-related issues and behavioral needs due to abuse and neglect. And I've struggled to find adequate psychiatric care for them because every time we find someone, they move on shortly thereafter to another state where they get paid better for their services. Very few providers take Medicaid or allow so few Medicaid patients that the wait lists are impossible. You just can't, if you have to be waitlisted for that. One of my boys currently lives in alternative residential housing in Rochester. So he's 2.5 hours away from us because of his severe behavioral needs. That he can't live with me and his brother because we are not able to care for him in the way that he needs to be cared for right now. Any local facilities for us in our area have long since been closed due to lack of funding. There's no place here for a youth that needs residential treatment long-term. I became a member of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Leadership Council because I've experienced much concerning trying to get mental health and behavioral health care for my boys, my foster kids, and also my extended family. What we have found is that there are so few providers available and that service providers have such long wait lists that it makes them almost worthless. There is no in-the-moment crisis care or beds and treatment facilities for kids and youth or adolescents. And even if it was available, there's no follow-up care to be found. New York has so few crisis care beds for children that you have to go wait at a facility, sometimes hundreds of miles away, to see if maybe they release somebody. There's also a bunch of other people waiting and hoping for the same thing. So this could take weeks if you could actually wait it out, but we couldn't. We needed help for my grandson, who was 18, who had to go to New Hampshire for substance abuse disorder counseling and residential care because there was no beds in New York State for a youth. The COVID-19 situation for children really hit my 16-year-old granddaughter hard, and she dropped out of school. And although she did try to return a few times, it was just too much for her with her mental health issues that arose during this time. COVID-19 and not being able to go to school were hard for her. They actually changed who she was. Last year, she suffered a crisis because of severe depression that resulted in her having very risky behavior, like cutting herself and having actual suicidal ideation. Her mom took her to the local hospital crisis center, and they waited 27 hours to be seen. Who they actually got seen by was a psychiatrist on video for a 5-minute consultation. After this, they told her that she could go home. When her mom asked about what should they do about medication, counseling, or treatment, since none were prescribed, they told her she could drive her to Rochester, 2.5 hours away, and wait to see if anyone got released. And maybe she could get inpatiented there. A quick call to Rochester found that there were 8 other children waiting, and it could be weeks before she could get in. So that was not a solution. Her risky behavior has continued, and recently she needed help again, but she refused to go back to the hospital because she didn't see the point of waiting for nothing. And we currently fear for her safety every day. The problem is that much of the state funding for mental and behavioral health care for children and families has not been used for that. For decades, the funding, while in budgets, has been deferred and never made it to the service it was supposed to go to. It has resulted in impossibly long wait times for care and very few resources specifically for children and adolescents and young adults. New York Human Health Service providers need an 8.5% cost of living adjustment to bring them in line and offset those deferments. In addition, $500 million, half of Governor Hochul's proposed mental health funding, needs to specifically be earmarked to fund mental health services for children and families. If we help children when they're young and first experiencing issues, we can stop generational mental health issues and have healthier adults. When started early, there's a much better chance of people doing better in life and avoiding substance abuse disorders and more advanced mental health issues. While I can speak calmly about these problems that we have encountered in our family trying to get help over the last few years, please know that we experience lots of tears, frustration, stress, and so much fear. And we're still worried about my granddaughter right now. Often our experiences were literally life and death when they were happening, and we just could not get in the moment crisis care help in our area. This happens to families every day all over the state of New York. So I ask for myself, my family, and on behalf of all New York's children, to those state representatives on this rally call, that the state support an 8.5% COLA raise for human services providers, and that 50% of the state budget funding be specifically earmarked for the mental and behavioral health needs of New York's children. And for anybody else tuning in, please hit the links, send letters, or call your representatives and let them know that we need this help now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing your story and your family's story, and really grounding for us why issues around access and receiving services and wait lists that families like you are experiencing really need to be addressed to support children and youth and the needs that they are experiencing. To transition now to our third party, we're going to hear from Mashrafi again, who will be speaking on the need to hold commercial insurers accountable for their discriminatory practices.
Hello once again, everybody. So as you all know, my name is Mashrafi. And I really want to speak on just the discriminatory commercial insurance practices. And I want to kind of start off with my own story. And as a low middle class person of color myself, it has been a major struggle to find a therapist. When finding a therapist, the identity of the therapist is extremely important, especially race, gender identity, and for some, even religion. Considering everybody has a different point of privilege, someone of more privilege would not be able to understand my struggles and may give advice that does not acknowledge their privilege or comes off from ignorance. With that being said, it is quite a shame how hard it is to look for a proper therapist. Many of the commercial healthcares have search engines dominated by white therapists, and in my case, little to no South Asian therapists, let alone Muslim ones or closer towards my age. To add on, even when a therapist may or may not be found, it is far too expensive to properly afford, and a lot of the times the insurance may not cover as much of a rate as we would expect. One of the main reasons why mental health providers don't take insurance is because the rates are too low. Commercial insurers make billions in profit, yet they set their rates so low that providers can't afford to take insurance, and children and families suffer as a result when they can't find a provider to meet their mental health needs. This has to stop. We need our state to require commercial insurers to pay rates that are high enough to create a network of providers who can meet the need in our state. At the hands of systemic issues and racism, us low-income people of color tend to be the ones who suffer the most and need most mental health support, yet are the ones who are able to least get the help that they need. It keeps up this cycle of going through something the most, being unable to get therapy, seeing things get worse because of this inaccessibility, and the cycle just goes on and on and on. Representation at a much more cost-efficient level is extremely needed, and we need to break that cycle, and we need to break that sense of hypocrisy. And so with that being said, we need state leaders to require commercial insurers to pay higher rates and to hold them accountable when they violate mental health parity laws. And including when it comes to keeping them accountable, we need to expand on proposals in the executive budget around parity and network adequacy. We need to require commercial insurers to pay Medicaid APG rates for in-network and out-of-network behavioral health services. We also need to increase funding for accountability and enforcement of parity, network adequacy, and contract violations, including the managed care plan's failures to pay last year's COLA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mashrafi, for sharing such a powerful call to action around our third budget recommendations and priority. We're finally going to hear our last set of recommendations from Carol Murdy, who is going to speak to the needs of increasing school-based mental health supports. Carol, I'll pass it off to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Carol Murdy. I'm a parent, a family peer advocate with Aspire Hope New York, and also a member of the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Coalition. I reside in Tioga County in the southern tier of New York. I'm here to share my belief that all children in New York State need timely access to behavioral health services in school and in the community to be successful members of our communities and to avoid educational disruption. I am the parent of a now 7-year-old daughter with autism spectrum disorder. Not unique to my daughter is the fact that she also suffers from social emotional disorders rooted in anxiety. 1 in 44 children are diagnosed with autism, and it is not specific to ethnicity, race, or socioeconomic status. Conditions such as anxiety, depression, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder occur more often in people with autism spectrum disorder than in people without it. It is important to highlight that the CDC has reported through their Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network that only about 1/3 of children with autism also have a developmental disability. This is critically important information because children with no cognitive deficits, including my daughter, are being removed from mainstream schools and put into inappropriate settings that completely change the trajectory of their educational path. Over the course of my daughter's kindergarten year, due to unmet behavioral health needs, she was subjected to undocumented suspensions, actual suspensions, suffered trauma from inadequate or inappropriate interventions, including seclusion and restraint. Her educational placement was disrupted 5 times over the course of the year, and she was eventually placed in a day school for emotionally disturbed children with trauma backgrounds. My daughter did not go into that program with trauma, but I assure you she left with it. This also had a severe impact on my family as I had to quit working to advocate full-time for my daughter so that she received a proper education, much of which ended up being provided to her from me at home. In February of 2022, at the time my daughter was officially pushed out of her home school district, she had only attended 11 full days of kindergarten out of a possible 101 days. This is not acceptable and not what any child should endure in their first experience with school. As they sometimes say, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, and what my daughter learned was that she wasn't worthy. She still suffers from this trauma, and we work hard every day to rebuild her confidence. As her parents, my wife and I worked for 5 years with early intervention programs to set our daughter up for success, only to have all the supports removed during the transition from pre-K to kindergarten, and were then placed further between a rock and a hard place with no access to services outside of school and no willingness of the school to assist with her behavioral needs. It was easier to just throw a 5-year-old child away into the system. A sad commentary on what we think of our youth. We believe if there was availability of behavioral health services at the time my daughter needed them, or that the school had been more equipped and prepared to manage our daughter's social and emotional needs, she would have not had to endure such traumatic experiences in kindergarten. We know that our tireless advocacy saved her from a system intent on failing her, and we also know there are so many other children without such advocacy who are falling through the cracks every single day. This speech was prepared days ago, But as I sit here this morning preparing for today's schedule, I watch from my office as my daughter walks down the driveway with my wife to board her little yellow school bus. This bus will take her away. It will take her away to another elementary school in another district, away from her brother and away from her friends in her neighborhood. My daughter was ostracized as a kindergartner, thrown away because something wasn't just right. Can you imagine that? Punished and thrown away as a 5-year-old little girl because her state, her community, and her home school district were unable to support her behavioral health needs. What a sad way to start your life. I'm serving on the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Coalition and the Solutions, Not Suspensions Coalition to do my part to ensure that all of New York's children receive the proactive, not reactive support that they need and deserve from their state and their school districts. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Carol, for sharing that powerful, I think really emotional story you sharing about your experiencing, highlighting this need of in school-based mental health supports. And I think I echo what everyone else here is thinking and feeling in saying that your daughter is worthy and we all need to do better. The state needs to do better to support children like your own daughter who are experiencing and suffering through these issues without needed supports in spaces where they should be feeling safe, welcoming, and supported. So, I want to say a big thank you to our last couple of speakers who really highlighted for us through their own experiences what we want to prioritize and advance in this upcoming fiscal year budget in New York State, and urging not only our governor, but state leaders and state legislature to act on and make sure that our communities do receive the supports needed so that way children and youth can thrive. We're going to close out our rally today hearing from one last speaker, Cody, who is also a part of our Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Council, who's going to sum up through his own experience, reminding us what is at stake. And then after Cody shares his own experiences, he's going to walk through all of you here today and remind you of the different ways you can take action, stay connected to our campaign, and be connected to building a network and a movement that is reaching all communities across New York State. So without further ado, I'd like to present our last speaker, Cody, to talk about his experience and how we can take action. Cody, I'll pass it off to you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Cody Houtman. I'm a biracial high school sophomore from Suffolk County, and I will be turning 16 next week. I joined the Healthy Minds, Healthy Kids Council in hopes that my story can help change a broken children's mental health system, and that others will not have to endure the years of trauma like I have as a result of the lack of proper mental health care and treatment. My story begins at a very young age. I received my first mental health diagnosis and was placed on medication at just 3 years old. My first inpatient psychiatric hospitalization happened when I was only 4 years old. That would be my first inpatient psychiatric hospitalization. A 4-year-old like myself should not have had to go into an inpatient hospitalization. Instead, should have received proper outpatient care. By the time I was 9, I already had been handcuffed and taken in the back of a police car 12 times to drive 45 minutes away to the nearest psychiatric hospital emergency room. 12 times is 12 times too many. My mother worked endlessly trying to get me the proper outpatient supports, but they just weren't available due to the lack of proper services for me to remain home. I wound up going into a community residence and then from there to a residential treatment center. After 2 years in the residential treatment center, I was able to return home. I was 12 years old and discharged home to home and community-based services. However, those services were nowhere to be found. I sat on waitlist after waitlist. While on a waitlist for home and community-based services, I had my first suicide attempt. I believe if I had the services I needed that were deemed medically necessary for me, I wouldn't have had that attempt. I had 2 more suicide attempts after. From the time I was 4 up until last April, I had 20 inpatient psychiatric hospitalizations. The majority of these could have been prevented had I had the proper services at home in my community. The truth is, these hospitalizations don't teach me how to cope and utilize skill techniques when I am at home. This is why it is important for youth like me to have the proper care and community supports also by being in an inpatient bed due to the lack of my in-home and community-based services. I'm taking away a hospital bed from a youth who so desperately waits on a list for an inpatient placement. How is this fair? Not only am I going through this, but I'm watching so many of my friends go through the same thing. Suicide is real, and I continue to watch my friends suffer so bad with their mental health that they also had suicide attempts, and they are too waiting for services and help that they need.
Great. Thank you, Cody, for sharing your own experiences and really highlighting and closing out our rally for us today. I'm going to share my screen in a moment as you kind of walk through how the audience can take action. But if you have any words about why stories like yours are important to share, feel free to share that with our audience, and then go ahead and walk them through different ways they can take action. Okay, Cody, I'll pass it on to you to talk about how folks can take action. Cody, you're muted.
It's not my fault. Today is just the start of our incredible movement. As you saw and heard, young people like myself, parents, caregivers, and advocates are ready to take charge and make sure we put a stop to this mental health crisis. Even more importantly, we know we can't do this alone. Your voice is essential to us. Succeeding and putting pressure on state leaders to support these other issues we raised today. Here are some ways you can support and participate in our state budget advocacy week. Join us on Twitter at 1 p.m. today for the Mental Health Matters Twitter storm. During this 1-hour Twitter storm, advocates like you will call attention to the issues raised here in our rally today. By posting together for us this hour, we will drive up attention in these issues with your networks and demand our state leaders to act, and hopefully get trending on Twitter. As we use the hashtag mental health matters hashtag, a link to the toolkit has been sent to your email and as linked on our the website. You can also complete our Take Action letter writing campaign online and send an email to Governor Hochul, right? Am I saying that correct?
You got it.
And your representatives, urging them to take actions and ensure all children in New York can access behavioral health supports they need. You can take action by scanning the QR code on the screen and in the chat. Later this week, you can support our digital Take Action campaign. Oh, no, did I read this? No, okay, sorry. Later this week, you can support our digital Take Action campaign by urging your friends, families, and peers to also get involved by writing to state leaders and sharing our priorities on social media. Look out for the email that will include sample messages you can send to help get others involved. And finally, stay connected to our campaign, our council, and our opportunities to be a part of this change by subscribing to our email newsletter and following us on social media. You have the power to help us build the momentum we need to make change happen. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to be here for this important day of advocacy.
All right, that's a wrap.